Hello, I thought I'd do a quick Tuesday tip this week on interfacing your fabric. I don't know about you, but you spend ages lining up the patterns and cutting the pattern pieces out of your fabric. Then you have to repeat it and cut out your interfacing, which I find such a laborious task. And you end up with all these offcuts anyway, all these bits and pieces that where you've had to cut your interfacing out. So you're going to end up with offcuts as such. So what I like to do is interface my fabric, the whole lot, the whole piece. Now if I've got meters and meters of fabric, then I don't. I'll just interface a meter. And that way, when I'm laying my pattern down, not only is it already in place, but when you come to lining the pattern up and putting it down, you can draw around it with your heat removable pen, and you can see the lines clearly for cutting, so that helps with that, rather than trying to see it on the reverse of this, which was still quite dark. You can probably still see it. In fact, yeah, you can see it through. So I wouldn't have seen it no matter what colour, because there's so many different colours. I'd never have managed it. So I've had to have tried to cut around this. You don't always get a perfect cut. So it does help with the cutting. You do have to line it up carefully, and I do measure the width, and I cut a piece out and I go across, and then I do another layer across. If I unfold it, you'll see that that's where I went across. Doesn't matter if you overlap a little bit or if you've got a tiny little gap, but it really helps. And then you can just come along and cut. And yes, I know there are patterns out there where they say cut 3/8 of an inch around the edge, like this pattern for instance. That's the seam guide, the seam allowance for the interfacing. To be honest, I like to interface to the edge, because then when I sew, I'm stitching the interfacing in place, because quite often the interfacing can start to peel away. Once it starts to peel away, it peels away. So the person you've gifted or sold your bag to is quite happily using her bag, and eventually the interfacing inside is coming away and the fabric gets all thin, and it can be a disaster. So I like to stitch it in place. That way it can't start to peel away and it stays intact. And you can actually just trim it out of the seam allowance. It comes away quite easily. And if you've interfaced a piece of fabric that you don't want to have interfacing on, quite easy. I use Shapeflex SF101 by Pellon. Fantastic product. And I also use something called Cotton Woven, which I buy from a lady called Shirley in Crackers Fabrics Facebook group. And I'm just trying to grab it. It comes in well, you can get it in different lengths, but I think I buy 25 meters at a time, and it's huge. This is folded in half, so it's twice as wide. It's massive, and it's brilliant stuff, absolutely brilliant, and it's a bit heavier than the Shapeflex. So again, that's really good for bags. So I use those two. Now, if I've fused it and I'm doing something that really can't have interfacing on, for one reason or another, it's quite easy to take this off. This is cold, and it comes away nice and neatly, and you can actually reuse this. I'm going to show you. I'll do it on a different piece of fabric so you can see that I'm not relying on any glue that's left on there, which there isn't. There we go. And that is fused. So, all's not lost if you've used it, because you can redo it. Anyway, and you can hear it. It did stick. that will go towards a pocket piece. I line all my pockets, the pocket pieces, with jigsaws of interfacing. It's how I use it up. It doesn't get seen and it's fine. If anything, because I overlap it as well, it's given a bit of added strength. Now, if you don't want to interface the whole piece of fabric and you just want to interface the pieces that you're cutting out, what you can do is you get your fabric and you lay your pattern pieces out to basically you're wanting to find the most economical way of laying your pattern out, like this. See, so it's all trial and error, see what fits where. If I put that up there, so I'm going to do this, and the thing is with this, you can shift it around and find what works. Obviously you need to think directionally. If your fabric's directional and the pattern piece is directional, you do need to be aware of that. So I mean, this is directional here, I've got arrows here going that way, so they're all going in the correct way. This I don't think is, no, that has to go across like this. So be aware that you do have to lay your pieces according to the direction of the fabric, like so. So that's what we've done for this. So I can see that's roughly, I mean, this is really a rough guide. I could probably play around with it a bit more to get the best fit. But what I then do is cut this piece of fabric out, just exactly what I need, and then interface this, just this piece, and then draw the pattern on and cut it out. So that's the other way of doing it. So that's two ways of applying your interfacing and not having to mess about with cutting out your pattern pieces, cutting out your interfacing, and then making sure the interfacing lines up with the pattern pieces. You don't have to do it, it's all done. And like I say, you saw what I did there. If you shouldn't have any interfacing in the seam allowance, when you come to, you've stitched your seam, just pull it off and trim it off, and you don't have any interfacing in your seam. So that's what I do, and it saves a heck of a lot of time. And yes, you've got the offcuts, but you'd have it anyway regardless. So again, as I said, you can just peel them off to use them at a later date, it won't matter. So there you have it. In case you're wondering, I often get asked, I said where the interfacing was from. This beautiful fabric is Beauty in Bloom by Chelsea Design Works for Studio, and it's pattern 4824. I bought this from Tanya Fabric Facebook group. If you're wondering where to get it from, join Tanya's group. And you can buy beautiful fabrics from Tanya that she orders in. And this pretty little thing is a Hilberg fabric, but that's all I've got because I've got a short selvage. I think I've said it all. So yeah, until the next Tuesday tutorial, happy stitching everyone, and get making those beautiful bags.